lived in Japan for 5 years. After returning home to America, I have stories to tell. To my Japanese friends, listen for entertainment. To my friends who have lived in Japan, listen for nostalgia. To my friends who want to travel to Japan, listen for inspiration. Welcome to True Stories of Japan. After I recovered from my illness, I started to think more about my future and about my life after college. So the university I was at was pretty good, but I started to think about how I could make the most of the rest of my college time and how I could possibly prepare myself for my career and my future after college. So I started to seriously think about transferring to a different university where I might have more opportunities. So I thought about this, and that's what I ended up doing. I transferred to a different university that was bigger, that had more opportunities, and where I thought I could grow more towards what I wanted to do after I was finished with college. So I did. I went to a new university, but I also started to think bigger in terms of my interests in history, in culture, and about East Asia. I was interested not only in Japan, but in the region at this point. And I started to think about how I could get a deeper foundational understanding of the different cultures that made up the region. So I actually took up another language, and I started to learn Mandarin Chinese. But I learned it for the purpose of becoming closer to Taiwan and learning about Taiwan. I was especially interested in Taiwan for a couple of reasons. The first thing is that's a place where a lot of traditional culture was preserved, specifically the traditional Chinese culture that spread throughout Asia and played a big part in the early development of other cultures in the region. I was also interested in Taiwan because of the language. As far as Mandarin Chinese goes, there's two different writing systems. There's traditional characters and simplified characters. And while simplified characters are used in mainland China, traditional characters are used in Taiwan. And there's a lot of meaning preserved in those characters, and there were more of those characters that were closer to what's used in Japanese. So I ended up learning more about traditional Chinese culture and became interested in Taiwan, and actually studied abroad in Taiwan in the summer of 2004. So I actually did go abroad to East Asia. But the first time I went abroad, it was not to Japan. It was to Taiwan. Now in Taiwan, I had a great experience. It was my first time to be abroad anywhere. I saw so many things and learned so many things. It was a great experience. I went there by a scholarship that I received to go there for the summer. And it was fantastic. It was very different than anything I ever experienced before, but it had a great impact on me being the first time I went anywhere abroad. So I lived in Taipei, and I studied at National Taiwan Normal University in Taiwan called Shida. And I was in a program there for learning Mandarin Chinese. But while I was there, not only did I study, but I saw and experienced a lot of different things. Some of the things that I missed, some of the things that I loved about Taiwan were going to eat at the buffets, going to the bakeries. There are different places that I went to. Like I went to Taipei Zoo and saw animals there. I went to Taipei 101, which they also call Taipei Yilingi, and went inside It was really cool to see the different stores in there. There was a really great bookstore in there. In the basement, there was an awesome food court in the basement. And I remember walking around it, and it was almost like endless of how many places there were to eat and get food. It was really, really great. I also went to Shilin Night Market. That place was really great. They had a lot of good food there. I also went to National Palace Museum, which locally they call Gugong. That was the museum where they preserved so many priceless artifacts that came from mainland China, like artwork, sculpture, and all kinds of things. That was really cool because I'm interested in history. I thought it was really, really cool to visit there. I also went to Sun Yat-sen Memorial Hall, Chiang Kai-shek Memorial Hall. When I walked into the front door, I looked to the right and saw that there was a stairway going down, and I went down it, and there was actually a museum inside of it, which was hard to find. I didn't know it was there, but it was there, and it was really, really cool. There was lots of things that General Chiang Kai-shek owned during his life, and even like a statue of him would look real, sitting at a desk. So those things like that. I also went to see a symphony event at like the National Theater, which was near Chiang Kai-shek Memorial Hall. So I had lots of good memories from those things. Also had some interesting experiences too with people. I remember I went to an internet cafe that was on my street near my university, and I was waiting in line to use the computer, and one of the workers got a magazine and gave it to me so I can read it to entertain myself while I was waiting to get on a computer. And they showed me the cover. They handed me a magazine that had Michael Jordan on the front. and she said to me, "你的朋友," which means he's your friend. I guess just because like I'm a black guy, she wanted to give me a magazine with Michael Jordan on it and tell me this is my friend. I'm like, okay, all right. But that also connected to something else that happened when I was there. The same weekend that I went in 2004 was the same weekend that Michael Jordan visited Taiwan as part of his farewell tour. So Michael Jordan was retiring, and he was traveling around the world to say farewell, but it was also part of a promotional push by Nike. And he went to Taiwan, and there was this incident that happened. So Nike Taiwan works locally in Nike on its own, apart from the headquarters in America, right? But in order to generate interest and especially generate sales surrounding Michael Jordan visiting Taiwan, they made a lottery. And here's how it worked. If a person buys a Nike product, then their name could be entered into a lottery for the chance to see Michael Jordan in person when he comes. And the more things you buy, the more times your name gets put in the lottery. And that will increase your chances to see Michael Jordan in person. As a result, as you can imagine, lots of people started buying up lots of Nike stuff because they all wanted the chance to see Michael Jordan. And I don't know if you know this, but Nike products in Taiwan are not the same price as they are in America. While we in America might go to the mall and we might see a basic Nike t-shirt with just the word Nike and the logo printed on the front for $25 or $30, that same shirt might be on sale in Taiwan for over $100. Or something like that. It was really expensive. And people were buying up stuff, buying up Nike products left and right to increase their chances to see Michael Jordan. So when the time Michael Jordan finally arrived, he was scheduled to appear for a certain amount of time so that the people who won the lottery would have at least be satisfied with how much money they spent and a chance to see him. But the amount of time that he actually showed himself for was less than was promised, and it was only 90 seconds. And when that happened, people got mad. People went to the streets. I remember being in one of those buffet restaurants and they had a TV on with the news. I remember watching the news and there's people in the streets burning Nike stuff. And people were mad, and I couldn't believe what I was watching. And they was interviewing people, and the reason people were mad is because Michael Jordan didn't stay for the amount of time that Nike Taiwan had promised he would be there for. And it was burning Nike stuff in the street, and it was telling everybody don't buy things from Nike, and it became this public relations nightmare that they had to try to control. Now, in the end, Nike Taiwan did do a lot of kind things towards the people who bought Nike products to make things right and to restore trust between the public and with the brand and with their operations. But still, I had never seen anything like that before. Now, when all this stuff happened, I was absolutely shocked. I had never been abroad. I didn't really know how people thought abroad about things from America. I did not know that all the way over in Taiwan, in Taipei, there were so many people that loved Michael Jordan so much. I had no idea. But that's one thing that I saw and experienced living in Taiwan that I would never forget. That's one thing. Another thing that I saw that I won't forget is when I went to Sun Yat-sen Memorial Hall, which I think I mentioned earlier. And that's like part of like a national mall with that honors the father of the country, what they call the Guofu, the father of the country. And there's a statue of him inside. And I went there looking to see or experience some kind of traditional culture or traditional national historic thing. But when I got there, what did I see? On the front steps, I see a group of Taiwanese teenagers with a stereo playing music, and they're breakdancing. Breakdancing on the front of their own national monument. Basically doing my culture in front of their own culture. I did not expect to see that either. I was shocked by seeing that. I still never forget that. I didn't realize how far hip-hop culture had traveled through the world, and that all the way in Taiwan, in Taipei, there's kids there that are doing it. I didn't know. I had no idea. But I would never have known or seen that unless I had went there and seen it for myself. So that was another thing that was really interesting. Now, one more thing that happened there was when I was walking to my class. And keep in mind that the place where I studied was one building, but it was part of the larger university. And while people from different countries were going to the building I was going to study Chinese, the larger university was full of Taiwanese students. So I was walking to my building, and this guy approaches me. He's a Taiwanese college student, and he spoke to me in English. And he said, "Excuse me, do you listen to hip-hop music?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "I am looking for someone who can teach me about hip-hop music. Can you teach me?" I said, "I guess so, sure." And then he pumped his fist and he was like, "Yes!" So we ended up meeting up sometimes, and he had so many questions about hip-hop music and hip-hop culture. I remember one time he brought me a copy of the magazine The Source. He was showing me what he read, but it was in English. He could not understand all of it, so I helped him understand some of it. He also brought me paper with printed out lyrics from the song Through the Wire by Kanye West, which had just come out. Because remember, this is the summer of 2004, and 2004 is when Kanye West's first album came out. So he was showing me that, and I had to explain to him what some of the lyrics meant. He was so interested to learn about it. There's some parts of it that, because of culture, he didn't get it. There's a line in the song where it said how I used 2 lifelines. I had to explain to him the TV show Who Wants to Be a Millionaire and how you use a lifeline to stay alive. I had to explain that reference, which he did not understand because they don't have that show in Taiwan. But once I explained it to him, he was so excited and happy to know what it meant and that he could get it. So We talked about music. He told me about hip hop in Taiwan. I talked to him about music in the United States. He was interested in all different kind of stuff. His favorite group was G Unit, which was also, I think, new about that time. Later on, he told me that before we met, he had watched me walk to my building before when he was with one of his friends. And he talked to his friend when he saw me and said, "Do you think that he knows about hip hop? I don't think he knows about hip hop." But then his friend said, "Yeah, he does. Look at his shoes." And I thought that was funny because I don't know. I was wondering the logic behind that, but it was funny that they said that because I had these Nikes on, and these black and white Nikes with these kind of elaborate Spider-Man design, and looked pretty cool. But I thought it was funny that they thought his friend thought that because I had cool shoes that I must know something about hip hop. So I thought that was funny. So this was another experience that I had that I did not expect to have, but it still happened by being abroad in Taiwan. So these are some of the experiences that I had that were unique and different, and I really learned a lot, especially about how American popular culture travels so far and how much people are into it and enjoy it and love it. I was really surprised, and this is way back in 2004. So that was a great experience being in Taiwan. I had many other experiences, but these are some of the experiences that stay with me, but that I always remember. Now, after I came back from Taiwan, I spent one more year in college and then graduated. Now, sometime after that, I actually went abroad again. I was really trying to go to Japan. However, it was really hard for me to go to Japan because it cost money, and it was money that I just did not have at the time. To go to Japan, I needed to buy my own plane ticket, and I needed to bring a lot of money to help me survive like 2 or 3 months before I would get paid the first time if I was teaching English. Now, it was hard for me to go to Japan because of how expensive it was, and I realized I just could not do it because I just did not have the money. However, one of my friends from college actually was in South Korea, and he was teaching English in South Korea. And I told him how I was trying to go to Japan, but it was kind of expensive, and I don't think I can go. So he said, "Hey man, why don't you just come here and teach English in South Korea with me?" So he actually talked to the company he worked for and actually helped me get a job. So I actually got a chance to go. But the difference between going to Korea and going to Japan is that at that time, now this was in 2006, at that time, the job in Korea would actually pay my airplane ticket to go. In addition to that, they would take care of my apartment too. So the barrier to entry was much lower. It was a lot cheaper to go there, and it was a lot more affordable and a lot easier. And because of the fact they covered those expenses for me to go to Korea, that allowed me to go. And I was still interested in East Asia as a region. And this was a region that I knew about, even though I only knew people from Korea and I knew things about Korea. And I started to learn more about Korea after watching the World Cup on TV in 2002 when South Korea's soccer team did really, really well. I became curious about the culture. I met some people online, which was rare at the time, but I did. And I got to know more about it, but I still didn't really know a lot about South Korea. But I thought, you know what? I may not have a lot of opportunities to go to South Korea or reasons to go, but this looks like a great opportunity and great reason to go because one of my friends is there and I have a chance and a time in my life to go. So I went, and I went to South Korea and I taught English there. I actually ended up staying there for 6 months teaching English. Now, this was another new experience, and it was great. South Korea was a great experience. Now, the first thing I can tell you about are the restaurants and the food. That was excellent. I always remember that. I have great memories. And even now, I'll still go to Korean restaurants here in America, remembering the places I went to when I was in Korea. I had all kinds of food there: kalbi, samgyeopsal, solentong, that soup. They serve it with those really thin mushrooms you cut with the scissors. I remember I went to Sundae Town one time and had sundae. It was really good. I also remember going to fast food places that were familiar but were still a little bit different than in America. For example, I went to Kentucky Fried Chicken in Korea, but I noticed that they put some hot sauce under the skin, which they did not do in America, but it was still really good. I remember going to McDonald's in Korea, and they had some burgers that they use extra spicy sauce that I don't think I ever had in America. It was really good. They had specialty burgers, like specifically the bulgogi burger. Bulgogi is a Korean barbecue meat dish, and they made a burger out of it, and it was so good. I used to go get that all the time. That was great, really, really good. And also, that was a World Cup year in 2006. In 2006, there was a World Cup, which I believe was hosted in Germany, and I remember watching games in South Korea. Now, this was 4 years after the 2002 World Cup, when South Korea did really well and also co-hosted the event. And this time, there was lots and lots of fanfare in South Korea about the World Cup. I remember one day we got off of work early so that everyone can go watch South Korea play against Togo. That was a really good memory I had. And I think South Korea won that game. So that was a really great memory for me. But I also saw interesting things around the World Cup too. If anyone knows, the nickname of the South Korean soccer team are the Red Devils. And people would have accessories like devil pitchforks and devil horns on their head because they're supporting the team. Because that's the nickname of the team, and people would wear that to support the team. I remember taking the bus, and on the bus from afar watching, and this was on a Sunday, people going into a church, and this little girl had devil horns on her head for the soccer game and was about to go into church. And right before she went into church, her mother was straightening the horns on her head so she looked right. And I just thought, wow, why is she wearing devil horns going into church? What's that? What's up with that? So that was one thing that I saw that was interesting. I think that's very rare. That doesn't happen a lot, but that was kind of funny. Also, I remember the last game that South Korea played against Switzerland, and South Korea lost, and people were angry. I was teaching English, and I had students who were like maybe 10 or 11 years old, somewhere in there, and I had students in class who were mad at Switzerland because there was a controversial goal scored, I think, by Alexander Fry, and people said that he was offside, and it was not called, and he scored. I think it was something like that. And the kid, they were so angry, and they're angry at him because he scored and eliminated South Korea from the tournament. And the guy's name was Alexander Fry, and this kid in English, he was mad. He was mad at Alexander Fry. And he said, his name is not Alexander Fry. He's Alexander Fried Chicken. Like trying to make fun of him. Trying to call him out of his name because he eliminated Korea. I thought that was kind of funny. I know it was not easy for the fans at the time. But these are memories I had of the World Cup and watching the games, and it was lots of fun. The only difference was the commentating was all in Korean, and I did not have much, if any, Korean language ability. So it was, in essence, like watching just the game with no commentating at all. Even though there was commentating, it just did not register for me because I did not know the language. However, World Cup was a big memory, and it was really cool to be there and to see how all the fanfare happened around the team, and being in a country where people really took World Cup soccer seriously, and it was lots of fun. There are other things I remember from South Korea. I remember when I first arrived, my luggage did not arrive yet, so I had to go to Dongdaemun to get clothes, and I remember that was like really disorienting because there was so much stuff happening immediately, and I was really out of my element because I went to lots of stores with lots of activity and busyness going on, and looking through different clothes trying to find stuff that worked for me, until I got my suitcases and luggage where my actual clothes arrived. I also went to Gyeongbok Palace, which was really, really cool. That's a historical landmark, and there was lots of history around that. Of course, being interested in history, that was a great visit for me. I also went to COEX Mall in Seoul. That's another place where I saw Nike clothes on sale, and I was really surprised of how expensive just a regular t-shirt and shoes were. And I saw how to me it looked like Nike was treated, at least in that place, like an exotic foreign luxury brand just based on the pricing, because I did not understand why it cost so much when the same thing in America was a lot less. But the reason why I say it looked like it was treated like a exotic foreign luxury brand is because it was priced the same way as the foreign luxury brands are in America. When we have luxury brands that come from abroad, they're priced really high, they're really expensive, and the reason is because they're from somewhere else, and it's something that is harder to get, especially if you wanted to get the authentic real one. So I noticed that was expensive, but it was in Taiwan too. That's something that's the same between those two places. But COEX Mall was a really cool place, and even if you're not buying anything, it's still a cool place to go and look around and walk around and stuff. And there were also other cross-cultural things that I saw similar to when I was in Taiwan. One big thing was how big Heinz Ward was in Korea at the time, and this was 2006. Now, Heinz Ward was an NFL football player. He was a wide receiver for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And what I didn't know is that he's actually had a Korean mother. And his mother was from South Korea. I believe he was born in South Korea and faced a lot of difficult experiences in his life by being biracial, since his father was African American and his mother was Korean. So his mother, wanting a better life for him, brought him to America. And that's where he grew up. He played football. He made it to the NFL. I learned about his story, and I thought it was so interesting. The Steelers went to the Super Bowl, and he was named the MVP, the most valuable player. And after that, him and his mother were invited to come back to South Korea. And he was greeted by the president of the country and also the mayor of Seoul. And that time when he came, he was welcomed as a sports hero, as a Korean sports hero. And he was on TV, and there was lots of publicity, and he was treated really, really well and put in national media as a point of pride for South Korea. And that was totally different than the experiences he had when he was young. They honored him, and they honored his mother and her experience too. And he also was involved with some organizations to help kids that were just like him when he was growing up. And this was so interesting to me to see that, and also the fact that on the same building where my job was, there was a huge billboard with him on it. There was a billboard for a bank with his image on it, on the wall, and I got to see him every day. So I thought this was really interesting that I saw this, and I didn't know all these things about him and his life, but I got to know about it by being in Korea. I believe that the leadership in South Korea realized that they're living in a changing world that's becoming more and more interconnected, and this was a way of attempting to broaden the idea of what a Korean sports hero was, that would encourage more Korean people to look at themselves as more diverse and cosmopolitan. After I returned to America from South Korea, I went to graduate school and I studied in a master's degree program. Now, in my master's degree program, I studied in the field of communication, but the communication department that I was in actually had a track for filmmaking. So I got into studying filmmaking almost by accident. The thing was, this department's filmmaking track was different than other programs because they did not require you to have past experience in order to learn filmmaking. I studied filmmaking there, specifically documentary filmmaking, and they allowed me to do it even though I did not have past experience. So I am really, really grateful for the opportunity to get into filmmaking, which is something that I was always really interested in, stemming from my interest in video games and also having grown up with movies too. So I actually studied documentary filmmaking and learned the fundamentals of filmmaking, and was a great, great experience for me. And I did make some documentary films when I was there. I made a short film about people who play video games. I made another short film which was just a montage about the art of Murakami Takashi that I did for a Japanese art history class I took. And I made a production thesis to graduate, which was about the experiences of people in Chicago during the presidential election of 2008. So I taught audio editing and I studied documentary filmmaking and I became a filmmaker. And then I graduated. When I graduated, then I had to think about what to do next. Since I had just become a filmmaker and was interested in film, one thing I thought I would do was work in Los Angeles and work in the film industry. After all, Hollywood is there. That's where all the movies are made. And I thought that that's something that I might have a chance to do. So I started to apply to jobs there in the film industry. But at the same time, I was still thinking about Japan. I still had never been to Japan. I had never lived in Japan. That's something I had wanted to do for years and still had never done it. So I applied to jobs to teach English in Japan. So I applied to jobs to work in the film industry in Los Angeles, and I applied to jobs to teach English in Japan. And wouldn't you know that the job I got, the only job that was offered from the applications I sent, it was a job in Japan teaching English. To me, that was the sign that this is the time for me to do it. This is finally my opportunity, the chance to go to Japan. So finally, I was able to go after all these years. Now, of course, at this time, I had already lived in Taiwan. I had already lived in South Korea. I already had experience being in a foreign country. And I had developed a lot more knowledge about East Asia that I didn't have the first time I wanted to go. In addition to that, I had a lot more to bring with me. I had graduated from college with a degree in history, and I had finished my master's degree as a filmmaker, and with experience in teaching audio editing and all of the things that I had gained by getting a little bit older in life. So this was the time for me, and not only could I go to Japan, but I had experience of living abroad and I had things to bring to Japan to contribute and add to my life. I had new skills and knowledge to bring with me that I could contribute wherever the journey took me in my life in Japan. So I finally made it. Now, when I arrived in Japan, what did I see? What was it like? What did I experience? I'll share that with you next time. thank you for listening to this episode of True Stories of Japan. If you liked this episode, please follow this podcast. This podcast has new episodes every week, so please join again next week. See you next time.